Have you ever met someone who commands a room without saying a word? They don't explain, they don't chase, they simply become still. And in that stillness, everything begins to shift. People notice, they grow uncomfortable. Some chase harder, others retreat. Why? Because when you stop being emotionally available, the dynamics change, the energy shifts, control crumbles, and what remains is the truth. From a young age, we're taught that being available is virtuous. Say yes, be helpful, respond quickly, smile, even when you're hurting. This isn't kindness, it's programming. It conditions us to equate our worth with our accessibility. But that kind of availability isn't love. It's a transaction. It's a performance. People become used to the version of you who replies at 2 a.m., who listens without boundaries, who absorbs emotional chaos without complaint. They aren't engaging with your soul. They're engaging with the role you've been performing, your emotional availability. You become a mirror for their wounds, their needs, their illusions. And the moment you choose silence, the moment you step back, delay your response, or say not today, the illusion fractures. Because the script they relied on, you playing the always there, always giving part, no longer works. You stop performing, and suddenly, they realize they never really knew you. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." So what does it mean when your silence irritates someone? When your absence becomes their crisis? It reveals them, not you. It exposes their dependency, their expectation, their silent control over the emotional access they assume they had. You see, you've been trained to give your energy freely. And every time you say yes out of fear, obligation, or guilt, you hand over a piece of your vitality. Those moments may seem small, but they stack until one day you look around and realize you're exhausted. Not physically, but existentially. Why? Because you've been leaking life force to people who were never present for you in the same way. They didn't love you. They loved how available you made them feel, how seen, heard, validated. And when you step back, they panic, not because you're gone, but because their supply is gone. Imagine a woman named Lai, who's always been the go-to friend. Whenever someone needed help, Lai was there. Late night breakdowns, last-minute favors, endless validation. But one day, Lai stopped replying right away. She didn't show up to solve everyone's mess. She turned off her phone, set boundaries, and chose silence over justification. The reaction was immediate. You've changed. You're selfish now. You're acting weird. But here's the thing. She hadn't changed. She had finally returned to herself. The people around her weren't mourning her absence. They were mourning the utility she had always provided. They mistook her exhaustion for loyalty. They called her boundaries betrayal. But Lai, she was finally breathing. Jung called this shift individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole, authentic, and real. It requires silence, not silence as avoidance, but silence as self-protection, as awareness. Withdrawing doesn't mean you're running from life. It means you've stopped bleeding energy into things that don't serve your growth. It means you've begun listening to a deeper voice, the one beneath the roles and masks, the one that knows what you truly need. Your silence becomes a shield, not to block love, but to block noise, not to reject connection, but to reject distortion. In today's world, people are addicted to immediacy, instant reactions, fast replies, constant validation. But power doesn't live in speed. It lives in presence, and presence is only possible when you are no longer reacting to everything thrown at you. Silence creates mystery. It creates space, and that space, it's where you reclaim your center. Yes, some people will be confused. Some will attack, others will disappear. But that's part of the gift. You're not losing people, you're losing illusions. And what remains will be real, clean, clear. So ask yourself this: who trembles when you go silent? Who accuses you of being distant when you stop playing the role? Who only reaches for you when they need something? You don't need to answer them. You don't even need to explain. Your silence is your answer. Your withdrawal is your awakening. Because when you stop being available, everything changes, and it begins in silence. Every time you respond out of guilt, every time you explain yourself to someone who's already decided how they see you, every time you pour energy into a conversation just to maintain the peace, you're spending your most sacred resource, your psychic energy, not your time, not your money, not even your reputation, your energy. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back easily. Carl Jung believed the human psyche is an energetic system, like a battery. Every thought, emotion, and action draws from that battery. There is no such thing as a neutral choice. Every yes has a price. Every argument, every justification, every moment spent worrying about someone's opinion is a withdrawal from your own soul. The problem: most people have no idea where their energy is going. They wake up already exhausted, not because they worked hard, but because they bled energy all day to people and situations that fed on their attention. Ask yourself, why do you feel depleted after certain conversations? Why does a single message from the wrong person ruin your entire day? Why do you go to bed feeling like you were busy but not truly alive? It's because your psychic energy is leaking through the cracks in your boundaries. Let me tell you about Min. Min is a high performer. He's smart, disciplined, deeply caring, but every time his phone buzzes, he feels the urge to respond. He can't ignore a call. He can't leave a message unread. He tells himself, if I don't answer, they'll think I'm selfish. And by the end of each week, he's completely drained, not from the work he values, but from all the little energetic debts he paid to people who never asked how he was doing. This isn't just Min's story. This is our story. The need to be accessible emotionally, mentally, physically has become a silent epidemic. We mistake availability for connection. We confuse responsiveness with love. We think being needed means we matter, but no one tells us that being needed is not the same as being valued. Every time you react impulsively, you lose a part of yourself. And the scary part is, it often feels good in the moment. That quick reply that proves your point. That emotional rant that shows them how hurt you are. That self-justification that tries to preserve your image. But all of it is noise. All of it is feeding a cycle where your emotional state is dictated by external forces. Jung warned us, that which you resist persists, meaning the more you respond to your triggers without reflection, the more those triggers own you. You don't become stronger by confronting every slight. You become stronger by choosing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. There's a difference between being emotionally expressive and being emotionally sovereign. One leaks, the other chooses. Being reactive might make you feel temporarily powerful, like you're standing up for yourself, but more often, it just traps you in someone else's drama, in someone else's narrative. You lose the plot of your own life trying to edit the script they handed you. True power isn't in defending yourself. It's in not needing to. It's in saying, I know my truth, and I don't need you to agree with it. It's in silence. It's in choosing peace over control. It's in walking away without leaving a trail of explanation behind you. One of the greatest illusions is that we have unlimited energy. We don't. You were not designed to emotionally babysit people who refuse to grow. You were not created to be a sponge for other people's dysfunction. You were not born to sacrifice your sleep, your purpose, or your clarity to soothe someone else's chaos. So stop leaking, stop explaining, stop showing up for people who vanish when you need them. Your energy is your currency, and the way you spend it reveals what you truly value. So here's the truth that will set you free. Your exhaustion isn't laziness. It's misdirected loyalty. You've been loyal to your triggers, loyal to old roles, loyal to being the person who always responds, but not anymore. You are not a hotline for emotional emergencies. You are not a 200-year income forisan. Sewer therapist for people who drain you. You are not a performer in someone else's emotional drama. You are a vessel of sacred energy, and your first act of liberation is this. Choose what you feed. Choose what you fuel. Choose what deserves the fire inside you. The world doesn't need more people who react. It needs people who reflect, people who know how to guard their inner space like a temple, people who understand that sometimes the most powerful answer is no response at all. What if I told you you weren't loved? Not really. You were used for your presence, your validation, your empathy, your ability to fix, to listen, to absorb, not maliciously, not even consciously, but undeniably. You weren't seen. You were convenient. Carl Jung called it the persona, the social mask we wear to be accepted. It's the role we perform in families, friendships, even relationships. We put it on to belong, to avoid rejection, to gain approval, and after a while, we forget it's a mask. You say you're fine, even when you're breaking. You smile when you're tired. You say yes when your soul says no. You nod along, even when your heart is screaming. That's not honesty, that's role maintenance. And what's worse, people get comfortable with your mask. They don't question it. They never ask what's underneath, because the role you play serves them. It's useful, it's predictable, it saves them from looking deeper. So they love the version of you that's always available, always understanding, always forgiving. But when you begin to shed the mask, when you say no, when you stop explaining, when you withdraw, the love disappears. The approval evaporates. The praise turns to accusation. You've changed. You're so distant now. You're not the person I knew. They're right. You're not, because the person they knew was a reflection of their needs, not your truth. Jung didn't just speak of the persona. He warned us about projections, the unconscious act of placing our own wounds, desires, fears, and unresolved pain onto others. But here's the hidden side of projection most people miss. When you're emotionally too available, when you abandon your own center to be present for everyone else, you become the perfect canvas for those projections. You become a tool for others to act out their inner dramas, their savior, their punching bag, their therapist, their emotional vending machine. And because you want to be loved, to be seen, to feel useful, you accept the role, even if it empties you, even if it slowly kills the real you inside. And the scariest part, they're not relating to you. They're relating to the idea of you, to the function you perform in their life. You are not a person. You are a mirror, a mechanism, a support beam, in a structure that collapses the moment you step away. Think of a woman named Ha, always the emotional caretaker in her group. Everyone came to her to vent, to cry, to lean on. She was always strong, always there. Until one year, Ha burned out. She started saying, "I don't have space for this right now." She stopped replying to late-night rants. She took weekends to herself. She stopped being the unpaid therapist. And what happened? One by one, they drifted away. Not because she hurt them, but because she stopped playing the role. She didn't lose friends. She lost users, people who loved the version of her that kept them emotionally afloat, but never once asked what she needed to stay afloat herself. Manipulation isn't always loud. It doesn't always shout or guilt trip or threaten. Sometimes it's the quiet guilt that whispers, you owe them your time. You should be there. If you don't help, you're a bad person. And that guilt keeps you compliant. It keeps you nodding, replying, giving, even when your tank is empty, even when you're collapsing on the inside. This is the silent contract emotional manipulators rely on. You keep reacting. You keep playing the role. They keep benefiting. No one speaks of the cost. But then, one day, you stop. You withdraw. You go quiet. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to protect yourself, to return to your truth. And suddenly, their narrative falls apart. The mask you wore for them no longer exists. Now they are forced to see themselves without the crutch of your presence. And for many, that's unbearable. They accuse you. They shame you. They call you selfish because your absence reveals just how much they relied on your emotional labor to avoid facing their own emptiness. So I'll ask you this: who are you when you're not performing? Who are you when no one is watching, needing, pulling? That version raw, silent, still is your truest self. And the moment you stop playing the role, you stop being used. You start being you. Not everyone will accept that. Not everyone will stay. But those who do, they're finally seeing you. Not the mask, not the mirror, but the soul beneath it all. And that is where true connection begins. There is a moment in your evolution when words no longer serve. You don't want to argue. You don't need to explain. You don't feel like justifying your boundaries or proving your worth. You simply retreat. And in that retreat, something powerful happens not just to others, but to you. Because when you become the mystery, you reclaim what the noise of the world had stolen from you, your presence. Most people confuse silence with absence, but real silence, sacred silence, is not empty. It's full of observation, full of awareness, full of energy being pulled back inward. Like the tide before a wave. Carl Jung understood this well. He didn't view individuation, the journey to becoming whole, as a loud process. In fact, it often begins in isolation, in stepping away from the stage, from the applause, from the need to perform, and in that sacred stillness, we begin to hear a voice we'd long forgotten our own. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. You begin to see who was drawn to your light and who was addicted to your warmth, but never intended to carry any fire of their own. You see who checks in when you're silent and who only noticed you when you were giving. There's a reason manipulators hate silence. It breaks the loop. As long as you're reacting, explaining, apologizing, defending, they still have you in the cycle. You're still playing the game. But when you stop speaking, when you stop showing up predictably, they panic, not because they care deeply, but because their access is gone. Their script doesn't work anymore. Your silence rewrites the rules. And here's what makes it even more powerful. Silence forces others to confront their own noise, their projections, their emptiness. You stop being their emotional mirror and suddenly they're alone with themselves. And not everyone can handle that. Have you ever noticed how people start calling you distant when you stop oversharing, or cold when you stop over-explaining? That's not about you, that's about them. About their discomfort with your sovereignty, about their inability to manipulate you through guilt or confusion. You are no longer their emotional emergency button. And for the first time, they have to deal with the version of you that isn't performing. The irony is, the more whole you become, the lonelier the path may feel, not because you're unloved, but because fewer people can sit with the version of you that no longer needs their approval. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But here's what he didn't say, or maybe what we forget. To become who you are, you must leave behind everything you're not. And that includes the relationships, habits, and identities that kept you liked but never seen. The silence after you set a boundary is loud. It echoes with doubt. You wonder if you're being cruel. You question if you're pushing people away. But sit in that silence long enough, and it becomes something else, not a void, but a sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, a new self begins to emerge. One no longer shaped by who others need you to be, but by who you were meant to be all along. So yes, silence will cost you something. It may cost you company. It may cost you comfort. It may cost you connections built on your compliance. But in return, it gives you clarity. It gives you presence. It gives you power. When you become the mystery, you become untouchable in the best way. Not hidden, but held. Not distant, but directed. Your presence becomes intentional. Your energy curated. And your life, finally, your own. So embrace the discomfort of silence. It is not punishment. It is not emptiness. It is your becoming. There comes a moment when you stop apologizing, not because you've become hardened, but because you've become whole. You no longer feel the need to explain your boundaries. You no longer carry the guilt of saying no, because now you understand. No is not rejection. It's recognition. Recognition that your time, energy, peace, and presence are sacred, and not everyone deserves access to them. From the moment we're old enough to speak, we're taught that being agreeable makes us good. Say yes. Be polite. Be helpful. Don't cause conflict. But that training teaches us to abandon ourselves. It's not kindness. It's self-erasure. You say yes when your body screams no. You smile when you're exhausted. You stay in rooms that suffocate you just to avoid making someone else uncomfortable. That's not peace. That's performance. And eventually, the soul revolts, because here's the brutal truth. The more available you are, the less people value you. What's too abundant becomes invisible. What's always present becomes expected. And when something is expected, it's no longer seen as a gift. It becomes a tool, a resource, a means to someone else's emotional end. Setting boundaries is not about pushing people away. It's about honoring the space where you end and they begin. When you start saying no without guilt, when you decline calls that deplete you, when you walk away from conversations that go nowhere, you're not being cruel. You're offering clarity. You're revealing what the relationship was built on your compliance. People don't get mad because you changed. They get mad because you stopped functioning in the way that benefited them. Carl Jung said that every act of individuation involves breaking from collective expectations. You are no longer a member of the emotional choir. You are learning to sing your own truth, even if that means singing alone for a while. Think of someone like Dewey. For years, he said yes to everything. He was the reliable one. People came to him for favors, advice, emotional support, and he gave it all freely, until one day he couldn't anymore. He stopped replying instantly. He declined invitations that didn't align with his peace. He started choosing himself. And just like that, the world around him shifted. Some people disappeared. Others accused him of becoming arrogant, distant, not the same. But Dewey wasn't lost. He was found. And what he found was this: the people who truly love you will adjust to your boundaries. The rest will resent the fact that you're no longer available for their convenience. If guilt has been your compass, you've been heading the wrong direction. Because guilt doesn't always mean you did something wrong. Sometimes guilt is a sign that you're breaking a pattern that was never yours to keep. You don't owe anyone constant access. You don't need to attend every emotional fire. You don't need to participate in relationships that only exist because you're afraid of being alone. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop being available to everyone is the moment you become available to yourself, to your purpose, to your healing, to your real life. the one that's not a reaction to others, but a reflection of your truth. Carl Jung understood something profound. The soul doesn't evolve in noise. It evolves in sacred isolation, the kind that doesn't come from loneliness, but from self-communion. When you start protecting your energy, the world gets quieter, not because you've lost connection, but because false connections fade, the ones built on guilt, on obligation, on performance. And from that quiet, something extraordinary rises. You, the unmasked you, the unedited you, the you who no longer performs to be loved, because you have become love itself. So here you are, on the edge of a new life, not louder, not flashier, just clearer. You've learned that your worth is not tied to your availability. You've realized that silence is a strategy, not a weakness. You've remembered that no is not selfish. It's sacred. From now on, you will not explain your peace. You will not justify your absence. You will not perform for crumbs of connection. You are done shrinking to fit into spaces that never saw you. You are done trading your light for belonging. You choose yourself completely, not out of bitterness, but out of truth, because when you stop being available to everyone, you finally become whole to the only person who truly matters. You